Okay, I just wanted to start a new tape. Here's the answer. It is an assumption by Californians that America will fight to hold on to, or that they will care. I have documented in the book multiple sources, radio hosts, politicians, CEOs, saying, you know what, you're all weird, we're tired of you making progressive laws we don't understand, leave. I'm not joking, it's in the book. Did you know that there was a CEO report that came out in the last 2 months? It was an interview of all CEOs in all of America, about 500. And they looked at the business climate of every single state. Now this was an official report, national news, was covered everywhere. In that report, one of the CEOs said, I am so sick and tired of the California business climate, they should leave the union. That's a quote that was in that report, it was an official report, and that was mentioned across the country. There was no protest. Nobody got upset. How dare you say that? Never happened. Gets better. So, everybody remembers George W. Bush, right? Okay. How many of you know who Jerry Falwell is? Okay. All right, so there's a White House webpage that every president gets. It's paid for with your tax dollars. So George W. Bush had his official White House webpage. On that, he gave a webpage to Jerry Falwell. Again, your tax dollars, official White House webpage. On that, Jerry Falwell takes questions and answers. One of the questions is from a caller. He says, hey, Jerry, oh, you know, I was just thinking, if terrorists sneak a nuclear bomb into San Francisco and light it up and kill everybody there with radioactive explosions, is that wrong because they're evil? Jerry Falwell said, no, that's okay. Your tax dollars, official White House webpage from the president who's fighting the war on terror. And remember, you didn't get your 9/11 security money when you deserved it more than any other state for 5 years. Add it up. It's a scary picture. But it gets worse. There's other radio hosts, Joyce Kaufman's one, who's basically saying, leave the union. I'm sick and tired of this. And it goes back, and it goes back, and it goes back. Everybody remember Johnny Carson? He said the only culture in California is the yogurt. Is the yogurt. Yeah. It's the yogurt. The only culture is the yogurt. All of our art, all of our literature, poetry, the things that we take valuable is junk. Real culture exists on the East Coast. We don't have it here. We're not valuable, we're different, we're strange, we're the land of fruits and nuts, we're full of commies and hippies and people who speak other languages, and we have immigrants here and people with different political opinions, and every bad idea that America ever deals with starts here. Well, they're tired of it. Yeah, there's going to be a couple of Americans who go, oh wait, that's our money. America does not vote based upon logic or finance.
No, they don't.
They vote on emotion. And what their emotion says is that you're not like them and they're tired of you messing up their business. So the majority of America is going to be overwhelmingly for this. And there will be a couple saying, wait, we're going to lose. But, I mean, come on. We invaded Iraq. We had no discussion of the amount of money. It's $1 trillion. Somebody could have seen that coming. People didn't want to talk about it. Here we are. Americans vote based upon emotion. Emotionally, they've already decided. That's the answer. Next question.
You keep saying that the money, our double tax, is going to 35 states. Why 35? Is there some document that says...
They're poor. It's just historically these states don't produce enough money to have first world roads. So they use federal money to give them first world roads, to make them think that their economy is doing well when actually it isn't. If you actually look at a gross domestic product map for the world, but then also broken up by state, that's a very rare map. If you look at that, what you're going to see is that a lot of the Midwest and the South states, their economy most closely relates to the economy of nations in Central Latin America and Central Africa. They're extremely poor. It's this image that they're all part of American states and they live in this first world thing. Yeah, collectively the GDP of America is like that, but individually these states are not. And the only thing that's keeping up this rouge for them is welfare stolen from you. Sorry, it's gone on for 30 years. Next question? Yes, please.
Well, I haven't heard you talk about some of the
I mean, like, we're a welfare state, right? Some of the other issues that we have to address besides just the good things.
Right. Okay, let's talk about us being a welfare state. So, $120 billion taken away from you to provide welfare for other states is one state budget. You could have a 200% increase in your state budget without raising your taxes if that money wasn't stolen from you. That means that you could pay for anything that you want and you wouldn't be spending yourselves into a bad situation. So spend, if you got the money, spend it. It's being taken away from you. But it gets better. How many of you know where the majority of the homeless in all of California originally came from? Anybody? Any guesses? Where do 95% of the homeless in all of California actually come from originally?
Other states.
That's right. It's not California. They are from other states. They have heard about our liberal, spendthrift, bleeding heart liberal way, and they came over here to soak it up. So, if you only took care of real Californians who were born or raised or lived here for a while before they needed help, the amount of people that are actually going to be claiming it is a fraction. We don't do surveys on this because they don't want you to know that. There was one survey done in downtown San Francisco. The percentage of homeless in San Francisco who were actually from California, 2%. So, welfare, yeah. We're not taking care of our own. We're spending $120 billion to pay for welfare in other states, and then we're spending most of 95% of our own welfare budget here to pay for other people who came over here to mooch off us. Stop that, and we don't have a welfare problem. Next question?
So you just put them on the border, or what would you do with them?
Well, that would be up to be determined by the move, but I personally would say that if Californians were serious about doing this, we would just say, hey, if you've been here for 2 years, you're Californian, because when you start getting into you're not Californian or you are, it's going to become very complicated. However, if you had control of your borders and your banking and your education system, you could stop further homeless people from coming here every single year in massive hordes like they do. Yes, please?
Going back to what's happened now with our Congress and they look out for money for themselves, no integrity, how would you deal with that in this new?
How this is done is a decision that 40 million people have to make. What specifically has to happen in order to move us into the economy that I'm presenting is something people have to work out. I have a bunch of ideas and I'm going to give you some. But I want to make it clear. I'm starting this discussion. I have a rough overview of what we can do and what we can achieve. There are 1,000 million details that would have to be worked out. And the only way that would be done fairly and would hold is if it was actually the California people having this discussion to work this out. That's also what the initiative is trying to do. We want to start these discussions. But here's how I would look at doing that. We would start looking at this on our own. We would start a commission, and actually this is the wording of the initiative. We form a commission, we start looking into it, we offer to the federal government, join with us, let's look at this together. If they don't, we go ahead and study it. We have our government look at these, interview all the experts, interview all the foreign scholars, talk about it, and move forward and educate the California people. Because here's what's going to happen. When we move, again, from 5% of Californians aware of how you're in a destitute spot, not because of anything you did to yourself, to 95% of the population, this thing's all on its own. It's going to snowball, and who knows where it goes, but it's moving forward. I have legal reasons why America would allow this, and they specifically apply to California and Hawaii, but in some of the speeches, other people have given me other legal recourses. There's one called a domestic dependent nation status that Congress can approve, which would give us the ability to have a subnational sovereign government. But we could also petition other ways, particularly that the way that California became a state in the Union is not the way that 48 other states became a state. So Civil War said if you join the Union, you can't, and you voluntarily, you can't leave. California never voluntarily joined the Union. It was an independent nation, it was recognized by America, and then it was militarily invaded by America and conquered. That's not the way that 40 other states other joined. So our state accession was violated, and the English common law, based upon the rule of terra nullius, I don't want to get into that too much, was also violated. And this has been recognized by British legal scholars and Russian legal scholars. So there's something to it. Yes, please.
I've been kind of mulling over what you're saying, and
Yeah.
being someone who was born in the Midwest and lived there for a long time, I tend to think of things more as a country as a whole. And I'm switching my mind a little bit is why wouldn't, if we think about kind of looking out after our own piece of it, why wouldn't coastal California or San Francisco make the same argument?
Great question.
Why wouldn't they just say, hey, look, we're generating all the wealth up here. We don't care about president.
Right. Great question, great question. And I've already met with the Southern California secession movement where they want to make the 51st state and talked about this. Okay, here's basically what it is. It's never going to happen because there is not two different California regions. Every study that looks at California culture has broken them up into 12 regions. So when Southern California says they're going to join us and they're going to join us and they're going to join us, that's an assumption. And academic sociologists who actually looked at California and broke it up into regions say it's more like San Diego, LA, Inland Empire, past Sierras, separate Sierra communities, Southern Valley, Northern Valley, North, West corner, coastal, and Bay. That's the actual breakup. That's how people think of themselves. Fresnans do not see themselves as LA people. That is an assumption. And when I talk to the Southern California secession movement, they're like, oh yeah, you'll join up. I go, are you sure? Because you're making an assumption. Fresnans do not see themselves as LA people. I grew up and I was born and raised in Fresno. They don't consider themselves Bay people, and they don't consider themselves LA. They consider themselves Central Valley. So if we're really going to split the state up into a bunch of states, it's going to be more like 5 to 12, not 2. Secondly, this idea has been talked about for 500 years and has never happened. There are records in the Spanish archives where they have the same debate. North is south, you're not like us, we're totally different. And it goes through the first 150 years of California being a state. It's never happened. It's been 5,000 years they've talked about this, it's never happened. And it doesn't match the actual socioeconomic data that's matched. But furthermore, and this is the key why we're Californians and we're different than America. Picture America, right? I want you to take a line halfway down America, halfway, and go straight down. That's called the I-35 freeway. It's an actual freeway, it's middle of the country, literally halfway, and it goes north and south. Starts in Texas and goes up. Also known as the NAFTA superhighway. Take that line, so here's America, line down here. From that line, all the way to the East Coast, down to the south and up to the north, is where 90% of the American population lives. Now from that same line, going to the west, there's nobody. There's a dot here for Salt Lake City, a dot for Vegas, and a dot for Seattle. And then there's this gigantic blob of people called California, who are half the continent away from where the majority of the American population lives. The distance from California to that I-35 population line, where you actually meet the bulk of the American population, is the distance from California to Mexico City. Now, how many of you feel that you are totally akin with Mexicans who live in downtown Mexico City? I'll judge by your faces you don't. That's what I'm saying. That's how close you are culturally to the people that live on the I-35 freeway going to the East Coast. And what that means is that they will always be a separate cultural population than you, and because you are one gigantic blob, you will always act like each other, even if you wanted to break yourself up into 12 little states. They would all have a single California identity because you are physically bumping into each other. It's called gravity theory. It's used in sociology and planning. And what it says is that if you run into somebody a lot, you tend to act like them. And if you don't run into other people, you tend not to act like those people. This is why Hawaiians don't act like other people. Japanese don't act like Asians. English people don't act like Europeans. They're a separate island. We're an island. We're an island with gigantic land seas that keep us away from all other cultures, which means we will always be one culture and we will always be different from all others. That's the answer. Next question? She was first by second and then you.
Okay, so if this happens, how would California relate to the rest of the United States? Would we still be some part of it?
Yeah. You know, the only thing that we need is the policy freedom. Somebody asked me, I want to wave my California flag, I want to call myself an American. Do it! Give us the policy freedom. Give us the ability to deal with our banking, immigration, border security, national security, trade deals. That's what we need. That's what's going to make us rich, allow us to have this economy and take care of ourselves. Call yourself whatever you want, put American flags all over your house, left and down. Give us the policy freedom. That's how we relate. And additionally, America's already had this form of government historically with Cuba, the Philippines, and they might have it with Puerto Rico again. And there was a 20-year period where America had this exact form of relationship with Japan and Germany in the post-war periods. So we probably go off that model, and it's been done.
That will never happen because the people on the East Coast won't let it happen.
The people on the East Coast won't let California leave.
Yeah, it's too much power. They're not going to let power go.
Again, I hear you. My understanding is that Americans vote emotionally. They are not going to vote financially.
Money.
I understand. I agree. But this country has made decision after decision after decision where if it was looking at the actual money, it never would have done those things. In my opinion, and yes, it's a debate topic, I don't want to get into it because it's difference of opinion, but there's at least an extremely good shot they're going to argue emotionally, and they're not going to think logically and based upon money, because that is the history of this country. I got to take her question.
Yeah, I think you also answer my question because I wonder that the idea that California need to become their own state was talking like about 100 years ago, but still never happened, and I wonder why and why it couldn't happen.
That's a great question. If you look at the history of California, it's always been its own place, totally different from the rest of the continent. So, if you type in Native American cultural maps, California state is its own Native American cultural region. And then the rest of the country is broken up into these giant swaths of 6-8 states is one Native cultural region. That means that going back 2,000 years, the people here in California were totally different than the other Native people. It's because of geography. That island effect. When you cross the Sierra Nevadas, the land is just not that good until you get to where the plains end, which is where the I-35 freeway is. It was that way 2,000 years ago, it's that way today. The I-35 freeway, NAFTA superhighway. So, we were different when we were natives, we were different when we were Spanish colony for 500 years. By the way, California was built by the Spanish about 100 years before the Pilgrims ever landed at Plymouth Rock. So if American identity gets to be something unique and special, then California Spanish identity also gets to be something unique and special, and even more so, because it has an extra 100 years on it. But then we take it up to 1860. Did you know that right after California joined the Union, within 10 years, it was petitioning to leave the Union? They just joined the Union, and then they kept saying, you know what, you guys in Washington, you're not like us, we want to do it this way, you get in our way, and they're, well, let's leave. The president at that time, last name Lincoln, said, I'm not fighting a two-front secession war, so I'm going to build something that's never been built before. Exactly. A railroad to connect America to California, and it was done in record time. That was not to show off the engineering promise of America. It was done so that this president, who was terrified of fighting the southern states, would have to fight a two-front war. That's because Californians were already thinking of leaving. Let's move it up to 1940. Did you know that in 1941, part of California tried to leave, and then the next day was Pearl Harbor, so that went away? Did you know that in 2005, there was a secession attempt? No. Did you know that online, there's a petition right now, and it's been there for 6 years, with 2,000 signatures of Californians asking to leave? We've always been different. People know it. We've been different for 2,000 years, 500 years, 100 years, and 50 years. We're going to continue to be different. And it has nothing to do with people, it's about geography. We are an island separated by vast deserts of sand that will never be populated by people. Remember the Homestead Act? Or a homestead and you go plant your land? Type in all the homesteads in basically all the Rocky Mountains. They've been abandoned. All the settlers and all that money that America spent to populate the West, guess what? It wasn't populated. So you didn't have to wipe out the native people because you don't live there anyways. They're never going to populate it. We will always be separate. I think.
Can I continue?
Yeah.
Let's suppose that if the case that California can become their own state, so what do you think the whole world will think about the United States, that they could not control their own state and make their state to
Yeah.
be
Excellent point. Excellent point. So in the book, I argue that America allows this to happen in order to improve global security for America. And that America will gain if America allows California to become the diplomatic negotiation center of the world. And here's why. The new superpowers are making their own UNs and they're blocking out America. So what happens when there's 7 of them and they're as powerful as America? You're going to have a bunch of organizations that America can't be part of. If you get California in the game now and have it be the world negotiation nexus, it will always keep America at the table. America might not be allowed at that table in 20 years or 40 years. If California is the world negotiation nexus because it would be subnationally sovereignly linked to America, America would always have a permanent table, chair, in world discussions going into the future. That's not something America can guarantee. America doesn't even talk about these other world powers and that they're pulling away from the UN and making their own things. Can any of you name a politician who's ever brought that up? That's right, because they're terrified and they don't know how to address it. You're spending $1 trillion on this war on terror. Has anyone said when the war on terror is going to be over? Can any of you recall a politician saying we're winning the war on terror? Can any of you recall a politician saying a date when we definitely won, or guys when this is over? Can any of you recall a politician saying we are vastly more safe today than we were before 9/11? None of them will say that. You will spend $1 trillion fighting this war, you don't know when it's going to end, and it has brought you nothing. The world is pulling apart, they're pulling out of these world peace institutions, and you have no plan to stop it, and you're not even discussing it. This is the plan to make sure America is safe in the world, because it's not dealing with the issue, and what it is dealing with is not the real issue. That's why America would win if it allowed us to do this. Next question? I think he was first and then you, sir.
What are the downsides of what you're suggesting?
Good point, good point. Well, the downside is basically we'd be on our own. That would mean that if something bad happens, there's not going to be support. Other than military invasion, that would be taken care of, but you know, when there's a recession or a forest fire or something like that, or a giant earthquake, there wouldn't be help. That's the downside. However, let me point something out. We don't get jack anyways. We never have for 30 years. So what exactly are we going to lose out on? Nothing. When something breaks in the state, you pay for it. You go to the feds, they say, you are spend-happy, bleeding-heart liberals, you got yourself into this situation, suffer. That's the reaction. We went to President Obama, asked for a recession bailout. You're spend-thrifty liberals, tough. There was a recession when President Clinton was in office. We went to him too and asked for a bailout, tough. George W. Bush didn't like us, George H.W. Bush didn't like us. Democrat president, nothing. Republican president, nothing. Democrat president, nothing. Republican president, nothing. Did you know that there was earthquakes when Ronald Reagan was president and the federal government still hasn't paid their money for the homeowners? You still didn't get your military base cleaned up. The Loma Prieta earthquake, there was no help. And I just got done talking about how when we have national emergency forest fires, you get nothing. Plus, it gets worse. Even if the federal government was willing to bail you out financially, if there was another recession, the World Bank says they effectively can't. That the California economy is too big, and so even if California did want to be what's called the lender of last resort, someone that you could go to for a loan, they financially can't even afford it. They don't want to admit that because that makes them look not super powerful. That's why you didn't get a bailout. That's why you're never going to get a bailout. And you don't get anything anyways. So yeah, the risk is that you have to take care of yourself, but you've already had to do that. Yes, please.
You criticized the Southern California secessionist movement for making assumptions about who would join them. I'm wondering what hard evidence you might have that other countries would see California as a neutral broker or peace negotiation.
Great question. Great question. Okay, so who knows about Yao Ming? Yao Ming, really tall basketball player? Okay. Yao Ming has started selling wines in China. They're California wines. He didn't do any advertising. They're exploding in the market in China. The Prime Minister of England came to California to meet Governor Schwarzenegger for climate change, met him, met other state officials, flew right back to England, didn't stop in America. The Prime Minister of Russia came to Silicon Valley, met with the governor, met with other business leaders in Silicon Valley, got right back in the plane, flew right back to Russia, didn't stop in the rest of America. That's happened with Brazilian leaders, Indian leaders, etc. The world knows who California is and has an awesome opinion of us. We would basically have to do nothing for an advertising budget if we wanted to move into this role. They already know us. We just aren't marketing ourselves. You'd spend no money on establishing your brand name. You just have to announce that you're open for business. Yes, please.
In your opinion, what is the impetus for World War III?
The impetus for World War III is that the world, as new powers rise up, feel that they didn't get to be part of actually deciding the center peace negotiation table. And so they begin to pull away from that table and make their own tables where they feel that they were accurately represented. California wouldn't have that problem because when we're starting our organizations, they would be made of the peoples of all the superpowers from the beginning. That is not how the UN and the IMF and the G8 and the G20 were made. And India, Russia, China, Brazil, and ASEAN knows it. Yes, please.
You say Americans are emotional voters.
Yes.
Do you have any statistics on the percentage, like in this room, at least half of us have relatives in what you call the Wild East or something?
I call it the main American population. That's the term of the book.
American population.
And most of my family's from Texas.
So, I mean, they might not want us to leave.
Again, you know, I've traveled to other states, I've traveled to my family in Texas, and I have things documented in the book. I don't know, and nobody can say until we're there. But there is as much evidence to show there is not going to be a united front of Americans going, hey, we criticized you, California, for 30 years, but please stay, we love you. And when we talked about how we're sick and tired of your ways and get the hell out of the union, that's just a joke. I don't buy it. Just my opinion. I have multiple documentations in the book, also citing that. You know, when people talk about it's okay for us to be blown up because we're evil, I don't think they like us. Yes, please.
You're talking now like it is secession. You're saying we're going to be alone. We're not going to be connected. We're going to, you know.
We would be connected.
Why aren't we still part of the United States? Why?
Well, the military and the dollar would stay in contact, and business contracts would stay in contact. But all of the other policies would go there. Because we had made this move to subnationally sovereign, the federal government would basically use it as a cheap excuse to say, well, we don't have to help you out anyways. They're not helping us out anyways. They would love a reason to say that they officially don't have to help us out. So financially, we would be more officially recognized doing what we're already doing, which is taking care of ourselves and never getting help from Uncle Sam. Her and then you.
I've heard this before about how money flows out of our state. Well, the fact is that we're rich and we have the money, and my philosophy is that people that have more money help the people who don't have as much money.
Absolutely.
Now, but other people, you're sounding, and I think that we are an interesting region, but other parts of the United States talk about their region too. First of all, they complain about getting nothing from the federal government when they really do get a lot from the federal government.
Exactly.
So to me this sounds very tribalistic, and then someone already alluded to it. What stops California then when we become this more autonomous region from not lingering into more and more tribal things. You know, like you said, the Bay Area, the saying, you know, why should we support this poor Central Valley that doesn't really, you know, give anything? It just takes from the rest of the state. I don't like the way this is going. I have what I have, and I have to give so much to you, and I always do. What do I want to be, poor? That's the thing. When people complain about paying taxes and stuff like that, do you really want to change it? I would take your 90% tax thing if I could have what you have. It just seems so like, woe is me. I have so much money and I'm paying to other people because I have more money. I don't go on with the whole philosophy.
I agree with you. There's a couple key tweaks I would make. The people in the 35 other states that you're paying for are not as poor as the children in the ghetto who have horrible schools in California and will end up in criminal prosecution or criminality or whatever you name it. Our schools are the worst in all of America. The worst. There is no other child in the rest of the country who has it worse. So if we're talking about providing for poor and less fortunate, it's here first before anywhere else in this country. And that means that you can take care of yourself and you are taking care of the most least fortunate people in the entire country. Because America's not going to. Go to South Central. Go to downtown Oakland. I've lived there. It's junk. Those kids have no hope. Their schools have been horrible since the late 1970s when we switched the property tax when Reagan was governor. You all know what I'm talking about. Get them out. Save yourself, too. Save these children and develop your economy. Become rich by helping others. There is no one who's more needy than your own California children. Now, if we're talking about tribalism, I wouldn't use tribalism, I'd use regionalism. And what I meant was that Californians are Californians. There really is not going to be a breakup of the state because we have a cohesive identity. And I know that seems radical, but when I go to the Bay, everyone in the Bay says we're not like LA. And when I go to LA, everyone says we're not like the Bay. Well, guess what? 49 other states can't tell the difference at all. That's the answer. Yes, Gracie.
The 35 states you're talking about, are those the states that give more to federal or less to federal government than they get back?
Yes.
And then there's 15 of the states that don't get as much as we give to the federal government?
Yeah, exactly. You're one of the people, yeah, exactly. The states that routinely talk about, we don't need the federal government involved in our business and taxes are too high, are in fact the ones that receive more from the feds than they ever give. I don't know why this popular misconception's out there, but this is it. We are included in the states that do pay more into the system than we get. However, when you look at those numbers, it's other states a little bit more, and then California a whole lot more. And then when you add on the fact that you pay for border security, national security, national emergencies, and blockage to trade laws, other states who are milked don't have those costs on top of it. So A, we're having more taken, and B, in indirect ways, we're having a lot taken that these states never deal with. These other states that you're talking about are right next to Washington, D.C., so their issues get heard. And they are not like us. And I want to emphasize that. California has had European, thank you. California has been as diverse as it is now for the last 500 years. We've had Latinos, Native people, Spanish, Indians, European immigrants, people from Africa who came on as skilled labor in Spanish ships, Filipinos, Chinese, Japanese, and some Pacific Islanders. They've been here for 500 years. Name another state in all of America who has anything remotely like that. You won't find it. That's who we are. Now, when you look at the other states, it's typically Plymouth Rock, and 98% of the population strictly comes from mostly the British Isles, not even the rest of Europe. Those are two gigantic demographic bases. But when we add the fact that our economy, almost half of it's directly linked to international trade, and the average state is only 5%, we are culturally different people, and we are economically different people. And what happens is when you get to some point, you are, in policy, totally different people. And that's why We have laws that we're ready to move forward with and are held up in Washington, D.C. We have trade laws we're ready to move forward with. It sits for 5 years under one president, it sits for 5 years under the next president. And both of them say, oh, the recession's important to me. Yeah, but not the way you Californians want to fix it. Again, don't take my word. There's a professor named Abraham Lowenthal. He's a USC professor. He worked in Long Beach State. He wrote a book called Global California Rising. It is specifically to the fact that California never gets to maximize its economy because we're thought of as weirdos. Don't take my word. Don't take my word for anything. It's all in the book. Yes, please.
Kind of go a little bit different direction. You talked about federal government doesn't put money in, but what about our national parks? And